Still your girl, put it in the crucible. It's not a different day. I'm just on my way out somewhere. But while I had you, I wanted to go ahead and cover those three stories that I mentioned in a previous video that um, there were at least three different instances I can remember that I told um, a guy that was in my face that he was either in a relationship or he was like proper married or whatever. Where I told them like if they were trying to act like they wanted to talk to me or basically have sex or carry on, I would say yeah sure if you can just bring me a signed permission slip from your wife, and right sure we can carry on. Pretty much almost always when I tell a male this, then right, obvious, then well, to me it was obvious that that was going to stop it right at that moment. That okay, obviously, I'm not going to be a male is not going to be able to get away with getting a signed permission slip from their wife. But as I was just saying in the previous video, there were a couple of instances where that actually backfired on your girl. And sure as shit, there were some guys that were able to obtain permission from their wives or girlfriends or whatever, one way or another. So the first story, just to cover it real quick, if you didn't watch the previous video, um, there was a guy I was saying that I knew, and he was married, but he kind of hadn't been anywhere and done anything, as I mentioned, and he ended up catching feelings for your girl. I knew he was married. We were good friends, and I said, sure, if you can get permission from your wife for us to be good friends, then sure, whatever. And he ended up telling his wife that he was in love with someone, and talking about me, and that he was doing what he had to do and this kind of thing. Now, as I mentioned, watch the video only because I went into more detail, and I don't want to bore whoever did watch it with like going all the way back over it. But so your girl, right, didn't encourage or tell him. I didn't even know. I didn't find out until after the fact that he told his wife, I'm feeling somebody, and that's just how it is. She countered, right? She next leveled all three of us by telling him, okay, well, go roam because God will bring you back to me. And I guess in her case it worked because your girl was not looking to usurp her man. And he was not feeling it, because in his mind, he was going to lily pad from his marriage over to, your girl, Sony Land over here. And my thing, what cracks me up about that is like, even if I was gunning for her man, why on earth would I? We already know hardcore, like it's hardcore confirmed that you're willing to leave a chick for the next one as long as she's in your face. Now, as I mentioned, at least this is what he told me, that they were high school sweethearts and they hadn't been with anybody else, and he was starting to get curious because he was in his young 20s, and for me, I was like, just doing my thing, solo rider, not that much has changed. But for me, I was not trying to get him to leave. And, he already went out and got permission. He was like really ready to do this. And I ended up sending him home. So the next story that happened like that, I knew someone. Again, these were usually people I met kind of like through car stuff or whatever, this kind of thing. So I was really friendly with this guy, and then he had a friend that I met just in the interim, and I thought he was so hot. He was so cute, and then he was like really intelligent, and like he had a really nice smile. And everything, and I just really attracted to him. So I'm like, I don't want to say making a move, but I'm definitely like kind of in his face, trying to get to know him or whatever. Now I don't tend to ask if people are married again. I feel like, right, if you're married, I felt you guys supposed to be proud of it or whatever, and that's supposed to be the whole thing. But most of the guys I knew, for one reason or another, would not have their wedding ring on. Either they did something mechanical where they, if they worked on cars, a lot of them didn't wear wedding rings, so it wasn't unusual for married guys not to have their wedding ring on. Maybe in hindsight, knowing this about guys, that should have been like a more typical prerequisite question. But at the time, I'm just like, wow, he's so hot, yada yada. We become friendly. We're chatting and chatting, but when he eventually comes out with it that he is married, and I'm like, wow. So, because of course we kind of been chatting and flirty, and I'm like really feeling him a whole bunch, and he said, well, I'm married, but it's not looking good for us. And your girl did, I will say, right, like I was experienced enough to know that married men almost never leave their wives. Maybe you've heard cheaper to keep her. Maybe you've heard just every excuse in the book. Ladies, if you're dating a married man, I'm not trying to throw shade at you. I'm just saying, if it were me and you're curious to know, I am, for the times that I did deal with married men, you guys saw that episode. Um, like I said, I was going into it because of the convenience of them being married, not because I was convinced that they loved me so much that they were going to break ties with their marriage. So if you do have a married man in your face that's saying like, oh, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave, who am I to take away from you the idea that you may be one of the very small percentage of men that actually do? I've seen it once, that somebody left one to go marry the other, and it was messy. So, but for the most part, every other married guy that I met, whether it was because I was dating them or I just knew them, like they were not going to leave. But they wanted a level of enthusiasm from their courtesan, that they wanted you enthusiastic, like they were going to leave. But this was a guy that, I was, when he told me that he was married, or because we had kind of already developed this rapport, I was kind of hoping that he was telling me that they were kind of on the rocks, right, convenient. And I was kind of hoping that, right, selfishly, I was hoping that that was true. But the thing was, like, at this point, he kind of had thrown the ball in my court of like, how are you going to deal with this? Because if in that case, I felt like it is on me if I choose to proceed, because he's saying he's married. Yes, he's guilty of flirting, maybe even guilty of an emotional relationship. But he's now that we heard the whole timeshare speech, if you will. It's up to me if I want to stay the rest of the weekend and sign that lease or whatever. So, at the time, right, your girl is going to be honest with you that I really wanted this guy, and like I said, I wanted to believe that he was going to, they were pretty much Dunsville. But in the interim, he ended up getting permission while they were estranged, because I ended up telling him, like, well, right, like, we can keep hanging out, sure, just clear it with your wife. And again, like, this was a case of a woman, opening the gate for her man, if you will. I mean, I know maybe that sounds a little possessive to say, like, she allowed him, but, generally, if both parties have initially agreed to a monogamous relationship, it's supposed to mean something, I think, for people who subscribe to marriage. So anyway, she had basically given him permission, more or less, to carry on while they were separated, because this woman again put her faith. Now, just to plot twist you, as I understand, at least this woman's family comes from like a Muslim belief. So I mean, I don't know if you consider that praying to a different God, but that's at least, even though Christianity and Muslim faith, to me, don't come for me, as a practicing Buddhist, I understand that I'm literally not about that life. But to me, when in regards to women and their place in the role of the family, there are some. Maybe you can at least agree that there are some similarities. However, again, this is an example of somebody looking to her faith, just as the previous example. Both times, two different faiths: Muslim for the sake of the story, and Christian. Both faiths telling this woman, or they concluded based on their faith or cultural beliefs, that they should allow their man to go roam, and they did. So right, like a second time that, and right, both women of faith, examples of non-Buddhist situations where this is, and I'm not saying, oh, this is what God told them to do. I'm saying that these are two women that subscribe to their faiths, on a like more than superficial level, that want to live their life in the way of faith based, and based on who they were and what they believe. They ended up telling their man both times, go ahead and roam, because my God is gonna bring you back to me. And they wanted these men, they wanted to prove it. And again, this is a man who ended up, right, well, they had a family, I mean, and again, they were just kind of separated, but not much different than the other situation, in that they were married, and this woman told her husband, okay, go out and dabble, because God's gonna bring you back. And right, sure enough, in both instances, they did. This guy ended up looking back to his family, decided, him exploring and kind of not knowing what he wanted wasn't enough reason to forsake everything that they had built. So I don't know how she feels about it now. I don't know if I think they're back on the level of monogamy. So good for them. So that's at least a different outcome. He concluded that he wanted to go home. So and then the third story, I'm going to hurry up and crank out real quick for you, is the last one that actually I did kind of touch base on that with the story about the hexing, is that I was friendly with somebody who was allegedly in an open marriage. Like, they both claimed to be in an open marriage. I literally went over this couple's house for dinner. I wasn't the third wheel in their tricycle, before you get any ideas, because your girl's not about, girl wasn't about that for them. But basically, right, like, the point is, I met her, she's like all smiling in my face. I ended up meeting her boyfriend, because she had a boyfriend, but in the end, that couldn't, so that's what I consider like more than a permission slip. That was an in-person, vouch that, he was who he was, she was who she was, and, he's going to do his thing. But then she quickly went to work, making it incredibly difficult for us to hang out. Excuse me, sexy. So go check out this story, Hexed by My Friend's Wife, to find out how far she was willing to go after, literally giving that permission slip. So I tell you all that to say that, oftentimes my little permission slip clause tends to filter the married guys and boomerang them, at least, if not home, at least out of my little orbit. But there were times that backfired. And again, like, even though it was like kind of fun to be a bitch and say, oh, well, give me a permission slip, it's not like it ended up in a warm and fuzzy situation in any of those instances. So hope you well, make it a great week. Nam yo harenge kyo. Whoa, I did it again.